Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. Hi, welcome back, Curious Hearts. This is Vera, and I'm here with Sam Brandao, who is an old and really dear friend of mine, who I have known for more than half my life, I guess I will say. Let's just put it that way. And Sam and I've had the great pleasure of kind of like growing up together and like being weird preteens together for a minute and being awkward teenagers and like 20 somethings who didn't know what we were doing. And like now we're both adults, kind of, I guess, at least
Yep.
in age. And I'm really, because I know a lot about Sam's life and his experiences, I am really excited that y'all get to hear about them. And I also think that this project of talking to people who have normal lives, who have normal jobs and families, and like on the outside, somebody might know you, Sam, as like a sort of happy, charming guy, real smart, maybe don't lose your temper all that much, but that they may not know kind of some of this other stuff. And so I'm really excited to get to have these conversations about something that is often really private and really intimate, so that we can normalize like what it looks like to have an actual spiritual life all the time. So
That sounds so
thanks.
fun. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. Thank you for being here. So is there anything that you want to say kind of about like, I don't know, before we begin?
No, I mean, I'm just excited to have this conversation. I feel like that was a very kind introduction, but also you touched on a lot of ideas that I have been thinking about a lot recently and even just today, and stuff that, frankly, if we were just having coffee together, I would want to talk about anyway. So I feel like, my head is in a place where this just feels really timely and welcome.
Great. Yeah. And I would say you are, you know, not single-handedly, but you definitely have influence in this even existing. I've been a yoga teacher and in some like spiritual life and world for, almost 15 years now. And, a couple years ago, you were like, hey, can we talk about some spiritual stuff? And so that was a really rare privilege for me to have that kind of conversation with someone who obviously like I've known for such a long time in so many other contexts. So yeah, thanks for being here. So I like to always start at the beginning with like your family and how you grew up. So what was your spiritual or religious life? What did that look like in your family?
Well, I would be tempted to start by saying that my dad was an atheist and my mom was a Methodist Presbyterian, but I do think that that could overstate actually the role of religion in my early life, because my dad's personality was so much more dominant. He was so much more passionate about atheism than my mother was about Methodism,
Hmm.
that he sort of made the weather in the house. There was no question that the wind was blowing in the direction of atheism. The cool kids were all atheist and in the house. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I
but
feel that
and
one.
mom, I think mom put in what she would characterize as like dutiful efforts to churchify us, and those did turn out to be really important. So in that sense, I feel like the idea of the half and half household could even understate the importance of the church. But the church was not important to me for any spiritual reason. It was important because of the music. And so I was in church, I would say, as rarely as I could manage as a young person, right? I wasn't in control of my life, but if I could, pretend to be sick or just drag my feet and not have to go and get to stay home. And like the comics were in color and the donuts. And it was just so.
Wait, did your mom take y'all to church every weekend? Was it
No,
that kind of
but
vibe?
well, I think early on she was trying to create that expectation. That was her goal, was that we would all
Okay.
go to church. But
Well,
because I
and
have
you're the
older,
youngest, right? Yeah.
right.
So
I was about to say the older siblings had already done a lot of kicking and screaming. So by the time I came along, she was going to make a renewed effort with me, but then maybe she gave up quicker with me than she had with them. Um, but I did go to church when there was a music performance. So, right, the children's choir, there was a bell choir. I was into that stuff, and there was a fairly new hire at the time, then in the position of music director at that church, who would then later become my piano teacher. I started taking piano lessons around age 10 and loved that, and got deeper and deeper into that, in the sense that he taught me to play the organ. I ended up singing in his like grown up people choir, and so by high school, I am not only going to choir rehearsal every Wednesday and another rehearsal Sunday morning before the service, but then before long, I'm a substitute organist at other places around town. So I may actually be going to church like 2, 3, 4 times in a weekend, weddings, funerals, but also like, and I played for everybody. I played for Jews for Jesus. I played in Catholic, every kind of, whoever had a service that had music in it. Because there's just so few people who play
you can
church
play the
music
organ.
nowadays. Yep.
And
Yep.
well, yeah. I
So,
mean, church music and on an organ. I mean, that's
right.
like how many people have organ shoes? You're the reason I know what organ shoes are.
There you go. Yeah. So that meant I'd heard a lot of sermons by even high
Hmm.
school. And frankly, I stuck with it through college. I had 2 church jobs through most of college. When frankly, the money was the most important consideration, but I'm still enjoying the musical aspect of the thing. But again, I'm parts of these communities along the way, to more greater or lesser extents, depending on how much time I spend there usually. But I'm not even really hiding my atheism. I would say the dynamic is usually churches don't expect their musician to be necessarily of the faith, or even really, I don't want to say that I was playing along, but it's not the issue. If you contribute musically to the service, that's, nobody asks any questions beyond
Yeah.
that, is my
One
experience.
one of my dearest friends is a pretty devoted Jew, and she sings in a church choir, like in an Episcopal
Totally.
church choir every week, right? So it's just like, yeah,
Yeah,
she'll sing, she sings about Jesus. That's fine. You
totally.
know, that's fine.
Totally.
So long as you sing about Jesus, nobody cares.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, yeah, and really, the end of the story, I guess, is that even after college, there were many times throughout life, especially law school, for example, where I was like, I could really quit. It could be a great time to stop doing this thing, and have my Sunday mornings free like other people have. And maybe that would change the way Saturday night feels. And maybe I would have time to do some other thing. But I will probably never actually quit, because the day I quit is the day, not only is the church going to have a hard time replacing me, but I don't have an organ in my house. And so that instrument is going to, disappear. And so it's not even that organ music is so important to me really either, but I don't know. It's half probably just inertia, Vera, and the other half is, um, that I do, the same reasons that got me started in the first place musically, now are just so firmly established that I'm probably going to be a church musician forever. But yeah, this is one of those. It's kind of funny about the intro you gave. Few people who know me in another context would guess that I have ever even been in a church, let alone I go every week.
Yeah. So right. So just tell the people at home, tell our listeners at home what you do during the day.
So my day job is as a law professor. It's probably, I don't know if that's the least churchy place on earth, but
Right.
yeah, we are in the law school. It's just so about rational, evidence based kinds of critical thinking, and so the it's not that there isn't a role for religion in the law. Religion's a big deal in the law. It's at the court every year, the Supreme Court, and it's something that we talk about. But I would say that the kind of conversation that I think we're going to have today is not a conversation that happens in that building. And even, there will be, I would say, a 50-50 chance that during a typical exam season in my building, there might be a yoga class offered. Um,
Right.
right. Just the one, like a one-off
Just the one, just
exam
like for
season.
stress relief. Yeah, exactly. In the same way that like,
Exactly.
yeah, great. You can go walk the labyrinth during finals, but
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And the sense being, and I'm sure that whoever puts it on is, I don't know, I've never been to one. They may be amazing experiences, but I just think of it as like, this is offered as, yes, it's a safety valve for stress and pressure, and that's it. And actually, I think what comes with that is that if you participated in that yoga class, for example, the other people in the room might be all kind of looking at each other sort of sheepishly, like, we're here because we're admitting weakness. We're admitting that this is actually kind of tough, where the culture elsewhere in the building is, we're tough, we can hang. And in fact, I like it hot, so turn it up a little hotter, please.
Mm.
That's the vibe
Is
mostly.
that is that still the vibe in law school? Is it still that kind of like competitive? I think sort of like the word bulldog is coming to mind, that like knows it, right? It's like you're taught to. I mean, you use the word critical thinking, which I think is interesting. I think in a lot of ways, the lawyers that I know in practice, right, not profession, or not like as teachers, but the the lawyers I know in practice are looking for what's wrong always. They're looking constantly for exactly what is wrong, and their job is to minimize the impact of what might be wrong, and also to be as absolutely correct as possible, right? It's like to make things like finite and specific. And yeah, in
Yes,
that way, like the law is sort of the opposite of the conversation.
exactly. No, I think you really nailed it, Vera. And that's what I want to add to it is that, um, well, I've been in this job now for 10 years. This is year 10.
Hmm.
And I have seen some of these things kind of shift. I feel like the culture can shift. I want to say that my law school actually is fairly collegial, and the students, I do think, take care of each other, and the faculty are very concerned about student well-being, like sincerely. I don't think they necessarily always know how to promote student well-being, but I think they're game to try whatever might work. Um, but yes, the competition is real. There is a true zero sum aspect to the way that the profession demands that people be graded and compared to each other. Um, and there is also just, yeah, the mindset that you're describing. We call it issue spotting in the building, not problem spotting. It's you spot issues, and and
But
that's
they're
a
not good
faculty.
issues. They're never.
Never. No. No, but you can cultivate a mindset where
Mm.
it's almost like it's fun. Like the more the merrier. The more issues you can spot in anything, the more potential interest there is. The more kind of engagement points there are for you. And so this is part of, I think, many of my students experience this feeling of like, law school is changing me in a way that is making me more annoying to my friends, more
Right. Or my
irritating.
partner. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's because when you start to train up some of these faculties, I guess I'll call them faculties, that this can be hard to turn them off.
Yeah.
And yes, especially I think truly a lot of the people who are drawn to the profession in the first place are combative. They enjoy a good fight, discussion, argument, whatever term you
Mm-hmm.
might use, and they see law school as a way to get better, sharpen their weapons and become even more efficient. And what I'm trying to get around to, the point I think of my educational approach in that building is to focus a little bit more on the flexibility of thinking and being able to see the other side of an issue.
Mm.
And that was something that was frankly hard for me as a student at first. I really thought, look, most questions have a correct answer. I'd like to identify what that is and argue for it as forcefully as possible. And this is like, I'm here to try to do justice. I want to identify what justice is and work towards it. And
Mm.
otherwise, what the heck am I doing? Why would I be putting my energy into this enterprise otherwise? And it was only with time and some repetition that it kind of got through my skull that the path towards efficiently recognizing justice and working for it is to be able to always think, how am I possibly wrong about this? If I were on the other side of this, how would I argue it? And that's another faculty that I think, in a good way, if you can start it going, it never really turns off. And that,
Mm.
frankly, is probably this. This is going to sound like a cheesy segue back to our real topic, but I came from a world where I came with a worldview that was like, yeah, there's no religion is the opiate of the masses. It's for people who have weak minds, and not to cast aspersions on anybody. The plenty of great people who are involved in it, but like, if you have your eyes open, you see that these are children's stories. They're fairy tales that they're part of people's cultures, and they kind of just absorb them. And then, but if you don't need that, and if you're not kind of put in a context where you kind of get it by osmosis involuntarily, then it's if it would be just an impediment to clear thinking and clear seeing, because it's fear based fantasizing and stuff like that. And so that's just so clear and obvious when you're coming up in a world that's an atheist, scientific,
Yeah.
materialist approach.
Yeah.
That
And I think we both had that kind of background for sure.
yeah, and it's just like it's it's so simple. There's just really not even much to talk about it. I mean, I actually did, I think, maintain a little bit of curiosity about what I would probably have called like world religions. Like, isn't it amazing that humans have come up with such a variety of these things?
Hmm.
And how could we compare the stories and see similarities? And what would that? I probably wouldn't have been able to go much further. I wouldn't have talked about like, what does this reveal about human psychology, that there's these parallels from one to another or anything like that. But that would have been, yeah, this is a purely academic interest in a cultural phenomenon. The same way I'm like, I should study art history, but I never actually
Hmm.
did. But I respect that people do study that, because, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of depth there. But it's
And
not
like
because
now,
it's,
yeah, like as an adult, what, how does that land for you now?
well, I think I finally realized that this too is a question where it's worth asking, how could I be wrong about
Yeah.
it? Right. And that the urge to be right and to argue forcefully for what is right, that is an approach which is going to bias you towards essentially like identifying ground that you think you can defend, and then defending it and
Yeah.
staying put there. And I really do. I don't know why I always have such violent imagery in my head, but I think of it as like a battle, a fort building enterprise, right? Like, I found this hill. I reckon I can defend it. I'm going to build a fence around it. Well, what that means is you never leave that hill.
Yep.
They're gonna carry you out of it if you
Your
ever leave.
your
And
protection becomes a prison. Absolutely.
exactly. Now it's just like, it's almost as obvious to me now as it would have been probably 10, 15 years ago, obvious to me that there was nothing worth exploring here. Now it's just as obvious to me that it's a profoundly limiting worldview. And there's just so much more to be curious about and to be interested in if you are not so quick to say, I have found something that is going to be, airtight from a
Yeah.
rational perspective. And that's
Yeah.
all I needed. So I'm done.
Yeah. And okay, so it's interesting for me, and I'm curious for you. I also had that same kind of background growing up, right? Came from a very, like, maybe my mom would have wanted us to go to church. I think she tried a little bit, but, and that's fine. Um, my dad, atheist, and like very academic, very focused on, excelling in you know, our personal, our professional and academic lives. And I had that same sort of like superiority complex towards people who believed. I think I was at the same time sort of similarly jealous of them, right? It's like, oh, it must be so nice to believe that, God has a plan for your life. Like that sounds cool. Um, but I did not have that. I was like, okay, but that's not me. And then the shit hit the fan, right? I mean, like for me, it was Katrina where I was like, oh, it was almost a logical, rational decision that like, if I don't figure something else out, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to get through this. Right. And so I'm curious what that, you know, was it that same kind of sudden shift for you? Or did something else happen? Or, I mean, I know about some of the things that happened, but I don't know.
I would say, um, oddly, no. I think I would not point to any of the events. So I do have big events to mention. I have two older brothers who committed suicide. Vera knows this, but I'm saying it for the audience's sake. And so the first died when he was 19 and I was 12, almost 13. And the second died when he was 42 and I was 32. So quite a span of time in between. But yeah, both big tragic events. And honestly, I put Katrina up there too. Katrina was a big deal for me too. I always feel a little embarrassed to say that because of course I evacuated and I'm incredibly lucky and grateful for how little I was impacted directly by it. But
Well,
I think everyone
little
who
you were
lived here,
impacted financially,
sure,
right? Or
yeah,
like
financially,
materially. I think
physically,
anybody
exactly,
who lived here was impacted
totally,
psychically, emotionally, spiritually in a
yep,
profound way.
totally. And yet I do not, there's not enough tightness in time. It's funny. This is like in law, we talk a lot about causation as a concept. Like how do you prove that something's caused by something else? And to their credit, lawyers and judges over time have mostly said, yeah, this is almost impossible. Like we have this word causation and frequently, lawmakers are going to put that word in and essentially somebody's going to be required to prove that something was caused by something else. Easy example is just if you get hurt in a car accident, say, and you're talking to
Yeah.
the lawyer who's advertising on TV, you're going to have to show that whatever injuries you're trying to get compensated for were caused by the accident. Well, honestly, the lawyer's best test is simply just proximity and time, right? It's
Hmm.
the thing that is the alleged cause came first and not after. That's important. The perceived effect, right? So
Seems
got to be in the
obvious.
right order,
Yeah, but
but
that makes sense. Yeah.
also got to be tight in time. Like
Yeah.
it could be after. It needs to be after, but not too much after.
Yeah.
And really, that's my answer to your question here. I feel like my interest in um, spirituality writ large has increased in recent years, but there was not any kind of like spike after a certain moment.
Yeah.
It seemed like it just kind of crept up gradually. And frankly, the thing I didn't know as a kid that I hope my kids realize sooner is that it isn't necessary either to like have of what I would have called like blind faith, like to just have faith in something and just
Hmm.
like that, as if that's just a decision you can make that you just have it.
Yeah.
Um, Nor is it necessary to like suspend your disbelief or turn off your critical faculties. And that instead, it's all that really is required is an attitude of curiosity, and then um, spending a little time and attention, and
Yeah.
then you can directly experience stuff that will, at least as my experience has been, it's pretty interesting when you start paying attention and
Yeah.
spending time. And so you don't have to take anybody's word for it. And you can have direct experiences that will be, perhaps surprisingly interesting if you're coming at it with a real skeptical worldview.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, I mean, with that segue, like what does your spiritual and or religious life look like now, besides the fact that you still play the organ Sunday
Yes.
mornings?
Still going to church. Still going to church.
Amazing. Still at church every week.
Yeah. And I realize I usually meditate on the organ bench during the sermon. And
Mm,
I'm using the opportunity mostly to try to not listen, or to try to hear the sound of his speaking, but not follow the sense. And I'm sure everybody in the congregation thinks that I'm like very devout and being
you're like
very
praying and like just is
exactly.
so immersed in the word.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but really, the answer to your question is that I feel like I'm so behind, other people who have been reading along all this time. Have so much more of a depth of understanding, and frankly, through that, I think they know more about the world and how many different kinds of people are in it, and how many different ways of life there are,
Mm,
other than just the world that you and I grew up in and think of as normal. But so I'm trying to catch up by, frankly, pretty much all I read now is religious nonfiction. Like I'm going
hmm.
to read a book about Buddhism. I'm going to read a book about Hinduism. I'm going to read, and really that's pretty much all I want to listen to. I do still study the news. I do still study the law, but I would much rather listen to, frankly, a podcast like this one, or
Hmm.
somebody talking about meditation techniques and traditions, or, I mean, that's just, to me, it's a real feeling of fun and, just, yeah, exploring and following curiosity around. And I would call myself at this point, probably naively, optimistically, like, um, there's a term for it that I read, but I'm forgetting what I've read. That's people who think like all the religions have some nut in common of
Hmm.
just wisdom and values, and that, yeah. So really the only thing about religion that I still reject as vehemently as I would have done as a child is the tendency towards proclaiming that any particular approach is the exclusively correct one.
Yeah.
As long as you're cool with the, like, yeah, I see how your approach might actually lead to the same place as mine, or if
Yeah.
not lead to the same place, it could serve a kind of person who's not me, maybe. But if you got that attitude towards your religion, and put it this way, if you're willing to call me a Buddhist or a Hindu, if I think there's value there, but I don't have to say that there's value only there, then I
Hmm.
would say I'm a member of most religions. Now, to everyone I look at, I feel like has uh, some richness to it
Some
that I'm interested
value.
in.
Yeah. And I think it's like, I sometimes say that um, religion wants to give you the answer, and spirituality is asking the question. It's like, I don't know, maybe. Well, what about, you know? Whereas and I think often it's religions are asking or answering the questions that spirituality asks, you know? Why am I here? Right? Why do people die? Why does shit keep going wrong when when I do everything right? And is something good happening to somebody who does bad things? Right? It's like those like very basic, like deeply human questions. And like religion is like because X, because this, right? It's I don't know, maybe the law school is a little bit more like religion, you know? It's like
Mm-hmm.
because causation, right?
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not knocking Hinduism because I feel also a great affinity. for that tradition. But yeah, like the notion of karma, I think, is often used just like the notion of sin, right? They are used as to abuse ourselves more often than I think they can be. Yeah, than they're used as tools of liberation.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think I agree. And I wonder about even this is the lawyer in me. Yet part of the fun of the law is that there is an answer to any legal question. And I do think that's why the whole joke is that lawyers can't do math. But I do think the same kids who like math class in
Mm.
grade school, because there's an answer and you're either right or wrong, those kids are also drawn to law school because
Yeah, they want an
the
absolute certainty.
exactly. And especially nowadays in a world where the search engine or the and now an AI assistant can right, there's no risk of hallucination, there's no risk of getting it wrong if the universe of possible answers is closed and fixed, right? It's only these courts opinions that matter. That's you can draw a line around that. And the
Mm.
answer is either in there or not. Or it is in there. It's just a question of if it's specific enough, the level of detail. But so that means it's all about words, right? It's there is a right answer, and the right answer is a group of words. And the only way for that to really break down is if the words themselves start to break down. The meanings of the words start to fall apart when you look at them too closely. But the power of language and the power of that tool to just sort of settle the mind or settle the question and answer it is that's what the law will give that to you your whole life long if you want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're interested in something that's a little bit more like, okay, but that doesn't feel like it expresses
The
the
truth.
completeness,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
yep. Then it's like, oh, okay, well, you got to go to another building to do that.
Right. Well, it's so funny because I think too about like we're getting a little off track, but maybe not. I One of my most recent favorite podcasts is Strict Scrutiny, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
like, right, it's like all about the Supreme Court. And like, I feel like a total novice. I have no idea most of the time what they're talking about. Sometimes I like zone out when they get into like the very legal details. But the thing that feels so true to me there is that like at the highest levels of the law, um, is this like deep question about like, but what did this mean? Like suddenly it becomes this like completely abstract, right? Like what is a citizen? You know, it's like suddenly you're like stepping out of, yeah, it's like stepping beyond the edges of like this very close held. And so maybe then it is like math too, right? Because of like, right, the further and further you go in mathematics, you also realize like nobody has any idea what's like, it's all made up.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that especially at the Supreme Court level, it becomes more like, yeah, we're not trying to describe a reality anymore. We're making one.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, yeah, what a thing. Um, okay. In the midst of all of this, right? In the midst of, being a law professor, raising your children, playing the organ, um, living in the world right now with children, uh, what, like, is there a spiritual principle that feels like an anchor for you? Is there
Yes,
something that yeah,
yes. Um, but I don't remember what it's called.
you don't need to know what it's called.
It's
You can just tell me about it. That's more fun.
yes, it has. As I recall, Jung either coined the term or borrowed it from somebody, and it means more or less the tendency of opposites to become each other.
Mm,
And it starts with an E, and I'll think of it in a minute, I hope. But what I think it may be similar to yin and yang,
Mm-hmm.
but I do not know enough about that religion to say for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say something wrong and stupid, but maybe your audience will correct me. But anyway, what I'm trying to express and what I think this term expresses is the notion that your, I guess it's kind of what we were talking about before. If you hold one position with enough strength and certainty, it will eventually collapse into its opposite.
Mm.
And that's I guess maybe the Buddhist concept of impermanence is sort of baked in here for me, right? That which you think is most permanent, unassailably true. The premise upon which your whole worldview is built. Even that, um, the most sincerely and deeply held belief that you have, it too can become its opposite. And I guess I think of it as either your choice is essentially you can recognize this, accept it, and go with the flow on that, entertain the notion of the opposite, or
Mm-hmm.
you can refuse to do that and enjoy whatever the universe does when you refuse to play ball and instead you're kind of standing your
Yeah.
ground on what you wish were a firm foundation. And so that's like both my it's one of my greatest fears, right? Is that everything that I hold dear is impermanent, right? The country that we
Yeah.
grew up in, loving. That's when you talk about spiritual upbringing. I didn't say this, but I bet I should have. It's now that I think about it, it's like I did come up with a kind of patriotism. We had
Interesting.
the flag. We put the flag out on Flag Day, and our family reunion was on the 4th of July. And, I was very used to the idea that my extended family was
Oh,
all different political persuasions, but we all pledged allegiance and sang patriotic songs and felt real emotion about how the country is free, and it's free because a lot of people were very courageous and willing to die in order to make that be so, and that it's shouldn't be taken for granted, and that on some bedrock level, all Americans, at least, and maybe everybody around the world, all freedom loving people. That would have been language I would have been very comfortable with as a child.
hmm.
And I don't think nowadays, I don't see a lot of that kind of patriotism around. I don't think it's cool anymore. I don't think the cool kids are doing patriotism and love of country. And
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like it's become a strategy, right?
yeah,
It's become a thing that we put on to, I mean, not I not like across the board, but I mean, I hear, for example, Democratic strategists talking about, we can't let them have the flag. We have to also, right? And I think it's like most of those strategies, like it comes from a good place, but yeah, we do, at some point along the way, yeah, it's kind of a bummer that liberalism, whatever liberalism, the left in the United States began to move away from that as a sense of, I mean, and it's so funny because like I think about this as, um, maybe I was just a contrary child. I mean, I think I was a contrary child. Like I still know about myself, like I am a great devil's advocate. I will immediately I will see the other side and argue it to you. It's not always my best quality. It's what I learned to rein in. But that as a kid, I didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance,
mm,
right? I would stand up because I was like, okay, I get it. I will be right. But there was something to me about being blindly allegiant to something, to declaring my allegiance because it was required. I was like, I'm not doing that. And that now as an adult, I probably feel more patriotism than I ever did. And it's so interesting to have a sense of like both deep patriotism and like really, personal understanding of what that kind of sacrifice looked like, and like knowing now also like my ancestors who were, in the Revolutionary Army or in the Civil War or whatever. Um, but also as an adult to see what's happening in the world and be like, oh yeah, we don't have to deal with that on a daily basis, right? I take for granted a sense of safety and security in my own home and on American soil that many people do not enjoy that feeling and never will in their lifetimes. Um, and that's like I'm speaking obviously sort of like obviously about the Middle East, but I'm also talking about Pakistan and India. I'm talking about, so many countries in Africa and South America, like where even in places where, maybe now there is a sense of security, it is recently won and not a guarantee. And that for us, it's just always, that's just been no, we're fine. It's, oh, that's interesting. Oh,
And
the
Vera,
American religion.
you made me tie this in too. It's the law, as I was describing it before, as this kind of academic enterprise with words and the closed universe stuff. That's true, but there is another reality to the law, which is maybe the reality of the law, the non-abstract reality is how does the law affect this moment in this place, right? Rather than some hypothetical spot or some thing in the past that we're litigating, the question being like, and I don't want to be flip about this, but if we needed somebody with a machine gun to be here right now, how long would it take for him or her to get here? And it would be a him, right? In most places there, but there,
Yeah.
that I think it is significant that it's now possible that it could be a her, and that he or she will get here in however much time. And then whose side will he or she take if there's a dispute going on here? That question can be asked and has a really different answer depending on where you're standing on the globe. And there are places where the answer is nope, nobody's coming. There's no one to call. There's no 911 service here. There's no
Yeah,
nothing.
there's nobody to
And
call.
so,
And
yeah. So what is the
or
law in
potentially
that spot?
worse, like there's somebody to call, but you don't want them to come.
Exactly. Exactly. So who is the law there, or what is the law? What does the law mean in a place like that? And so for liberals like me who didn't necessarily ever think really in those terms because of the safety that you're talking about, but you start to think like, okay, maybe I do need to think more about not just rights and responsibilities and justice, but also like force projection and practicalities about how you really create safety and the value of that you can create enough safety that
Hmm.
there still needs to be an answer to the question, who shows up here first with the gun, but everybody in the neighborhood doesn't have to be constantly asking themselves that question in order to make their
Yeah.
decisions and go through their daily lives.
Yeah. There's a lot. There's so many threads there. Okay. What's interesting is that when you were talking about security, one of the things that came to my mind is exactly where you started in terms of spiritual principle, which is like, on the one hand, sometimes you can be so safe that you're trapped, right? Um, and on the other hand, uh, for whatever reason, I just keep thinking about 9/11. And that there was something that I just understood so innately when 9/11 happened, that this assumed sense of security that we had as a nation had always been an illusion, and that now we were going to put on some more theater, right, to like reinforce that illusion so that people didn't get right. And that the flip side of that is like then this sense of, Buddhist non-permanence, where you go, there's no such thing as safety. Safety is an illusion. There is no such thing as being effectively protected, you know? for me, right, as then the perfect like practical example of this is like if I had a gun in my house, I would be more likely to die as a result of having that gun in my house than not having a gun in my house, right? And there are all sorts of reasons for that, but like that is like such a right. That's where like the protection becomes, and that also when we come back to like the sense of impermanence and like non-attachment that we in the Buddhist traditions and in sometimes in the yoga tradition we work with, that like the only thing I am trying to protect is my existence. Maybe my stuff, right? Okay, maybe I'm going to try and protect my stuff, which is like here's the law, right? And then I'm trying to protect my life, right? And for some people, losing their life is the worst thing that could happen. And for other people, it would be, the pain or the suffering that they might experience. But all of that is like, okay, if we can just accept that all of that is possible, then what do we need protection for? And that doesn't mean like you go out, consciously, actively into the line of fire. But I think that level of internal, like spiritual, there is a reason why so many resistance movements have deep spiritual foundation to them, I think. There's a reason that Thich Nhat Hanh came to hang out with Martin Luther King. Like that is not, it's not accidental. It's like that's part of the work. Like, what does it look like to fight for something that you may never have and that you might lose? I mean, and it's so interesting because that is the foundation of this country. You might lose the thing that you want to keep the most. Because there is no guarantee
Right.
at any point along the right. Like in hindsight, we're like, oh yeah, we won the Revolutionary War. We won the Civil War. Like we in hindsight, it's easy to be like, okay, and then the good guys won, right? And then being an adult in the world, you're like, no idea what's about to happen. No idea.
Absolutely. And that's huge. I feel like that is, yeah, certainly this is where my head is. It's where it goes when I watch the news, and I think the benefit that I see right now to the spiritual exploration is, I guess I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's applying that same principle. Even the question of safety, right? Like safety is an illusion. I can hold that for a second and say, yeah, that resonates. The whole self is an illusion. The self wanting safety. Okay. But I can also do this one and say, danger is an illusion,
Right. Yeah.
right? And, my instinct is to think of myself as somebody whose neurosis is that he doesn't adequately feel safe, even when he actually is safe. And that, there's a miscalibration there. But that could also be backwards, right? You could flip that over too. Maybe the issue is that I don't feel danger when there actually is danger. And the same thing, the urge to be safe and to maintain safety and to retreat maybe, or to fortify. I find myself thinking the opposite. Don't tell my wife, but I have been feeling a kind of weird call, like as my spirituality has grown, if that's what's happening. And I am maybe finding that I was never quick to anger, but like my ability to feel angry is really, it feels like there's been a shift there, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But that makes me feel drawn to do something like go volunteer to fight in Ukraine. I know that sounds nuts, but
I will not tell your wife that.
yeah, and I won't do it because I'd be useless. But I'm, I think, right. That's part of me pushing myself to think about the opposite. What would be, and I do see, when I start to let my mind linger in that place for a second, again, as absurd as it is, right? If you do have both a belief in the values, right, of freedom or something like that, and an ability to stay calm in the face of chaos or violence or destruction, then you know if those really are indeed the qualities that an individual possesses, the place to put those to use is a place like that.
Yeah.
Then maybe not Ukraine in particular. There's probably places all over the globe that would let a person be, really effective in a goal that's about like helping other people, knitting the world together,
Yeah.
resonating with love and compassion, you know. And so I do again. I feel like I'm not actually equal to the speech I just made, but it's an example of my head, um, maybe feeling like it is expanding a little bit, at least in terms of seeing more possibilities in the world than I used to.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is one of the things that feels really true to me is, one of the sort of my core spiritual principles is that the natural evolution, like the natural destination of spiritual practice is what we call social justice work, right? That like if we follow a path of, you know, releasing our deep attachments to ourself, my stuff, me versus you, and then getting to a place where we recognize that everybody's suffering all the time and that everyone who is suffering wants to be free from that suffering. And just like I want to be free from that suffering, I actually want you to be free from that suffering more than I want to be free from that suffering. That's where my spiritual practice is, right? Is like putting me on level playing field. Um, it's like if we follow that all the way to the end, I don't think there is any other place to arrive other than something like that, right? Which is the only thing to do is to work for the liberation of all beings in whatever form, right? Whether that looks like, I mean, it's ironic because like in some ways you already are doing that, right? Working for the liberation of beings. But also, that might look like literally going to war. That might look like environmental work. That might, it's like all of that is like, it just feels to me like it's unavoidable. Um, yeah. And like nothing is more painful than a social justice warrior without a deep spiritual practice. It's just like, oh my God, please stop, right?
I think
Um,
we call those people public interest law students, and I have a lot of them in my world.
do you? Okay, I will tell them that you said that. Um,
Yeah.
okay, as we come to a close, I am curious now, what is the spiritual practice or practices that are keeping you connected to that? I mean, clearly you're reading and studying, which I think of it as a practice, but
I would say it's meditation for me. Um, I have had a kind of on again, off again relationship over the years with meditation. Or maybe that's actually a little bit generous to me. What I had was a lot of false starts. I had a lot of attempts that were maybe even you know serious, not half-hearted, but also just nobody around me meditates. I didn't like nobody in my house growing up. I didn't have a lot of good information, frankly, about um, even just like what to expect, the variety of approaches that might be possible. It took me a lot of blundering, frankly, before. I started to appreciate any of that. And that meant, again, that means that I've come to it in the last few years, and I really feel like I'm behind, and hoping to catch up in some sense, or make up for lost time.
It's so funny because I feel like we've had this conversation before, and over again, I'm just, we talk about, and you hear people talk about beginner's mind, and like I wouldn't exactly call what you're describing beginner's mind, but I have had practices of various kind on and off for 2 decades, and um, I miss the phase of my practice where I was like, it's like being in young love, where you're like, I want to see them all the time, right? I'm sort of like in a lifelong commitment now with some of my spiritual practices, right? It's like, oh, it's you again. Okay.
That's
So like
awesome. I love that.
but like every time you talk about it and you're just like, oh, but all this, I'm having all of this amazing, and I'm like, oh, I miss it. I want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's like being ahead or behind at all.
No, yeah, I think I'm glad you said that, because that's the last, I promise, the last time I'll do this, but I, one of my favorite dualities that feels really present to me right at this moment is on exactly this topic. Are you getting on the meditation cushion every day with a sensation that you are making progress towards some goal? Is there, um, are there indicia that you're looking for? Are there metrics you're tracking? Are you optimizing, right? Are you bringing that mindset to this?
Right.
Because if not, then how do you even do it? Or like, how do you know you're doing it or not? Or what is it? It kind of, the mind reels at that point. But isn't the point that there is not a goal, that there is not progress, and that in fact, when you're at your most balanced and stable and still, what you recognize is the self is an illusion, that's an amalgamation of a bunch of stuff that isn't a self, and
Right.
progress and a goal are nonsense
Yeah.
and
It's just mess in the way.
mess. Exactly, is a great way to say it. And so the practice becomes, maybe it becomes not a practice, or maybe it becomes something else. But yeah,
Yeah.
the the
It,
the dual truth that I don't feel like I can resolve them. I think they're, at least I'm not smart enough to see how it can be true that both, that the goal and the progress are, what it's
yeah.
all
I mean,
about. And
yeah.
the absolute inverse of that is also, there's a black hole where that should be.
Yeah. And it's like, I think about, the like paradox of practice, is you have to do it.
Right.
You actually have to do it. You can't only think about doing it or talk about doing it or read or study about doing it, right? Like you can't, learning about meditation is not meditating, like first of all. Um, but I also struggle with the challenge of like, for lack of a better word, like selling practices in the beginning to like people who are in a newer phase, because uh, I think many of us needed metrics and measurement and evaluation, and am I getting somewhere, and what's happening, and oh, and it feels good. Oh, I must be doing something right because it feels good. Like all of that stuff to me is like, that's actually really essential on the path. Um, it's one of the things that I say in yoga classes is like that one of my teachers said to me, like the only reward for one yoga posture is another more challenging posture. That's it. Like don't get attached to, this down dog or this forearm stand or this handstand or headstand or whatever you're doing. Um, don't be excited about doing drop backs. Like it doesn't, all of that stuff. And then at the same time, it's like there is an innate human thing that goes like, well, then what's the point? Why would I even show up to, right? Why would I even go to class if it doesn't matter if I can do the poses? Right? It's like this very, yeah, it's sort of a mind fuck.
Sure.
Um, And it reminds me of like one of the definitions of meditation that I have heard, of which there are many, which is the ability to hold two contradictory thoughts in the mind at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
right? With a sense of ease.
Yep.
To be like, doing the practice is essential and don't try to do it.
Right.
Like the both
Exactly.
of those, right? And then like our ego is what walked every single one of us into a yoga studio, church, you know, meditation practice, any of that is like, I'm gonna meditate, right? Or like, I'm so miserable, I have to do something, right? I mean, it's the just flip side of ego. I have to fix it. I have to, something needs to change. And and then I think about good old Krishnadas saying, um, you do the practice when you can, so you have it when you can't. And, I think unfortunately I have lived long enough now to understand what he's talking about, you know. Um, and I think it's and that's also then the flip side, for example, around asana, around, physical yoga practices, that at some point you can't do those things anymore. You know, BK Iyengar did a headstand for 30 minutes every day until he was 80. But when he was 81, he stopped doing them, right? At some point, you won't be able to anymore. And unless we have something to manage that moment,
Right.
right? Like that is the thing that we are working for. Um,
I got a spooky one for you. I forget who said this, but somebody was, you know, being contrarian. I almost used a fruitier word, but devil's advocate, as we've been saying, about breath practice, right? Which
mm,
is funny for me, right? As I'm sitting here, because yeah, I'm still a beginner, but I am, one of the things you notice is that a lot of people are going to recommend that you check in with the breath as a foundational practice. I think somebody said that the Buddha said that the breath can take you all the way there. I don't know if that's actually in the canon or not, because I
hmm.
haven't read that yet. But anyway, breath, 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 right? If you're new to this world,
Yeah.
that's like everybody breath, breath, breath.
Yeah.
But somebody, some smarty pants teacher type person apparently said, what about when you're not breathing anymore? Then what are you going to do? You got to have can't, can't, can't hang everything on a breath practice. What about when your breathing stops? And I like that, because I feel like that's another example of that moment where I thought I was in a firm spot, right? It seems like all the authorities agree on breath practice, right? I could probably let my guard down here and just chill and not think any further. And then somebody's like, no, you should probably think about that, dude.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
maybe not think about it. Maybe right, the thinking is the problem. But anyway, that's
yeah, I
or
think
maybe there
usually
is
the
no
thinking
problem.
is the problem.
Yes, you've thought your
No,
way into another problem.
thinking about it is usually the problem.
Yeah,
Along those same lines, like one of the things that I think is also just so essential for us to remember is that the breath is already perfect. And
yeah,
when I say that, I mean it. It's like it got you here. Breath is
yep,
fucking nailing it.
yep.
Breath is nailing it when you're asleep. Breath is nailing it when you're driving. Like
Hmm.
the breath is 100%. Like 100% of the time, the breath is nailing it. And so like our like playing with the breath is cute. It's useful. It's a tool. Um, but that for me is like the other flip. It's like the breath doesn't need you to pay attention.
Right. Yeah,
And
I'm
I
glad you
like,
said that. I'm one of the
yeah,
people whose struggle, right, or and a felt struggle is that when I pay attention to my breath, I tend to mess with it, right, rather than just observing it uncritically. I'm either trying to slow it down or something, and it's like I can let it be by not paying attention to it. I'm good at
Yeah.
that.
That's
If I
actually,
lose my place,
that's the only
then the
way.
breath goes. Yes. But if I'm paying
Just
attention,
FYI.
yeah, it
Right? I
feels
mean, like
like
there is I can't remember now whether it's like now a scientific thing that it's like it has a name or something that like uh, something that is observed is changed inherently by being
sure.
observed. The
That
breath is
sounds
that
like
way.
quantum.
Oh, yes, I think that is quantum, right? But it's
Yeah,
like you cannot, when you start paying attention to your breath changes.
totally.
Period.
Yeah.
End of story. Right.
Yeah.
And so noticing how it changes is interesting. And then noticing what you want to do to like watching all of the drama when you notice it is also really useful. I mean, I don't know, the Buddha might have been right. But yeah, it doesn't not change. It doesn't the unobserved breath is the unobserved breath, and then there's everything else.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I'll have to say this though. On this topic, it's kind of a funny point for me. I was late in my life coming to a sport. It's which I won't bore you with the details, but it's essentially a martial art,
Hmm.
and you're supposed to. The tradition is that this martial art is done with music and with
Hmm.
singing, and I love that about it. It's an additional challenge to try to sing and do something like
Hmm.
aerobically intense. Um, but well, in my early studies of this martial art, I found a lot of the time that I was holding my breath. It's like I
Yep.
was trying to do it underwater. I was holding my breath the whole time. That was, I guess, and obviously unconsciously, if I had thought about it, I would have thought, no, breathing would be helpful. Breathing would
Breathing is
make this,
probably useful in this
no, it's
circumstance.
going to be
Yeah.
it's going to be a positive. But yeah, singing, if you can remember to do it, does
Right.
force you to breathe.
It
And so
does.
that would have been a real enhancement. But that's an example in my life and recent life and a pretty intense one of my breath. If I just left it alone, the thing running on autopilot was not good. I mean, I didn't pass out or die, I guess. So, you have to give it credit for that much. But I was not
It was not,
pro
yeah, optimized,
program.
easy. It
Yeah,
wasn't
right.
efficient, maybe. And
Exactly.
we could talk too about why entering into a martial art practice. And I don't know a lot about, but like the inherent purpose of a martial art practice, right, is the martial part. We're going to Ukraine, and your nervous system holds the breath to protect you and to brace and to do all sorts of other, right? So there's a part of me, I just go back to like, it might not have been what you thought was the most useful,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
still wins.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Set yourself in opposition to it at your peril.
At your peril is the answer,
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm.
Well, my friend, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
A total delight to flow with you as always. I hope we do it again soon. And
Yeah.
I'm yeah, I'm thrilled to be here and grateful for your friendship and this time.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited for all of the lawyers who are going to listen to this.
Oh dear.
I
Bless all
really
of you.
am. I feel like it's a great yeah, I just feel like it's a great example in a lot of ways. So,
Well, I wish
thank
them the
you.
best and you.
I know. May they be free from suffering
Yes. Happy and peaceful.
and at ease. Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.